Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this one, I'm taking a look at Black Widow T4 finally. A lot of you have been asking me to review the character at level 80 and T4, so I finally got enough books and stuff to be able to do that. Technically, I did do that before, but because the Venom update came around right after I got all the books for it, I kind of had to put it off until now. This video likely won't be too long, since I'll mostly be focusing on how the character compares at level 80 to T4, not so much how level 70 compares to 80 and T4 like that. So if you are curious to know how the character is just at level 70, I have made a video about that when the uniform for Black Widow initially came out. So if you do want to watch that as well, just for comparison, I'll probably post a link of it at the end of this video. I included the first clip of her at level 70 just to give you a basis of where she was at, and keep in mind that all the testing that I did for her is with a mighty CTP of Greed. I have to note right off the bat though that a CTP of Greed is probably one of the worst CTPs to test with, just because the proc happens every other time, and you don't necessarily know when the proc will be active on your skills, so the results likely aren't too conclusive, but to make it easier to understand, I basically just interpreted as if the character had maybe a 50 to 65% all damage proc. So basically like a really badly rolled CTP of Rage. Based off of this interpretation, you can see that Black Widow's uniform isn't really the greatest in PvE, since even with a suboptimal proc, she can barely clear stage 29 of Knull, and since her release there's been a bunch of characters that can do the same stage, but even without a damage proc and with well over a minute left over. One of those is Kamala Khan's new uniform, or Ms. Marvel, and there are a handful of other ones as well. So the main thing that I'm looking at in this video is how much better the character gets at level 80 and at T4, and you can see that with the level 80 increase, she's able to clear the exact same stage about 2 minutes faster. If you watched my Kamala Khan Ms. Marvel video, you would know that she was able to clear this stage with about a minute and a little bit left over, and Widow is doing that with 2 minutes left over, but she does have a suboptimal proc, so that means that the characters, I would say, are pretty close to on par. Maybe Black Widow has a little bit of an edge, probably in the higher stages where the level difference means that she gets less of a penalty, but they're not too far from one another. The highest stage that I was able to nearly clear with Black Widow in a CTP of Greed build was a stage 49 of Knull. I just had to play it a little bit better, and I'm sure I would have been able to finish it. If you're wondering what would be an optimal build for her for PvE, specifically for things like World Boss Legend, you can definitely use something like a CTP of Energy or a CTP of Destruction, since she definitely is proc friendly. However, for modes like Alliance Battle or Giant Boss Raid, a CTP of Rage will likely be much easier and more consistent in those modes, especially considering that she basically has capped out dodge and guaranteed crit rate. I was also curious to see how she would handle stage 59 of Knull, since that was the highest that I could go with her, and surprisingly enough, I was able to complete it within the first 2 minutes on the first phase, meaning that she might have been able to complete this stage, but that's really weird because I wasn't able to complete stage 49. I likely just had a lucky first phase with the Greed. That's kind of how it works, it's inconsistent, so I likely would have finished with maybe 7 or 10 health bars left before I ran out of time. I didn't really go past the first phase for two main reasons. One of them is because the character is pretty tough to play, considering that her survival really isn't that good, so oftentimes I would end up dying trying to do these tests. And another is that a lot of her skills or her skill rotation is a little bit clunky, considering that skills can be cancelled or you can get interrupted, and the rotation really needs to be tight because the third skill has a transferable single skill damage proc that you want to put on either another skill, or I guess if you don't want to risk that, you can put it on the skill itself. And if you get interrupted, your rotation basically doesn't really do that much damage. On top of that, the ultimate can often get interrupted as well, so you can miss out all of the damage from that skill too. This is likely why I was getting inconsistent clear times when also paired up with that CTP of Greed build. As a quick refresher, for those wondering what the skill rotation is, or at least what I found was the most effective from the ones that I tested, and works with a single skill damage proc, and probably CTP of Greed too, is to use 4, cancel 3, cancel 5. 5 is the skill that you want to proc on, and then you can use the second skill and the first skill as filler. With the T3 skill available, you essentially do the same thing, but swap out the 5th skill for the ultimate skill. So you do 4, cancel 3, cancel 6. Unfortunately, you can't really squeeze in the 5th skill when your T3 is up, because the lingering damage from that will erase the single skill damage proc that you're trying to transfer from the 3rd skill to the ultimate skill. This is why you want to cancel fairly quickly when you go from 4 to 3 to 5 or 6. And also, once you have your T4 available, you basically just use it whenever it's up. However, you do kind of want to save it closer to when your ultimate is also up, so if you see the meters kind of filling up at the same time, you might want to hold off rotation for that. Generally speaking though, Black Widow is one of the characters that really isn't too outstanding at level 80, but when she gets her T4, she becomes much better. One of the things is that she gets a lot of survival from being able to dodge a lot of attacks from the T4, which really improves the problems she has with her survival. And also, the T4 also provides damage, which solves her other problem as well. So basically, it covers all of the issues that are holding her back at level 80 when you get her to T4. As you can see from this clip, I was able to clear stage 49 with 1 minute and 30 seconds left over, which previously I was barely able to clear, or maybe not clear. Then on stage 59, I cleared the first phase 40 seconds faster and was able to complete the fight fully with close to 50 seconds left over. If you aren't really too impressed by these clear times, again, just keep in mind that this is with a suboptimal CTP of Greed, so the proc is really inconsistent, and if you are using an actual proc, like an energy, destruction, or rage, the clear time should be well over 1 minute faster. Just for reference, I also took her into stage 60 of Mephisto, and even with this crappy build, I was able to beat him with close to 30 seconds left. One of the reasons why it's a little bit slower than Knull is likely because in the last phase, Mephisto does tend to move around a lot, so the ultimate can go out of range, and the skills might get interrupted, so the buff from the 3rd skill might not go into the skill that you want, meaning that it'll kind of screw up your rotation and cause a little bit more time to go by. I did take her into Dormammu on the day that she had a type advantage, and even with the CTP of Greed, I was able to complete the first phase in under 2 minutes, meaning that if I played out the whole fight, she probably could have completed it with anywhere from 2.5 minutes to 3.5 minutes left over. However, I didn't do the full fight for the same reason that I mentioned earlier. That is that at level 80, her survival is kind of subpar, and a lot of her skills lock you down in animations, meaning that once you get to the very final phase where he shoots out those insta-kill orbs or ones that get you to half health, it's very difficult to survive with her. Again, her T4 skill makes a massive difference, not only for her clear time, improving it by anywhere from 1 to 2 minutes, but also making her survival much more acceptable. When you have the T4 skill up, she can basically face tank those insta-kill or 2-hit orbs and take no damage at all. Even with that subpar build, I was able to complete this fight in roughly about 5 minutes and 10 seconds, which again, with a proper PvE build, you easily could have done it 1 minute to 2 minutes faster, if not more. To further reiterate that point, here is me carrying 2 other people in a 3-person giant boss raid, and I was still able to complete the fight all by myself, even if there wasn't a lot of time left over. I know that a CTP of Greed likely doesn't seem that impressive from a gameplay perspective, since if the character had a proc, you would see just how good they are, and if they didn't have a proc, you would see how well they could do even without one. However, when I took her into Alliance Battle Extreme, she actually did pretty great with that build. A CTP of Rage would obviously be better, probably about 1 million or more. However, I was still able to score past 9 million on the Speed Hero Female Day. Taking her to T4 allowed me to go past 10 million, which means that with a proper build, you could easily hit 11 million or possibly cap out with a really high-end build. Although the character is really solid for Alliance Battle Extreme, since she can cover all of the seasons, she has Silence on her ultimate skill, Burn on her 5th skill, and Paralysis on her 3rd and 2nd skill, Her real value will likely come with the addition of Alliance Battle Legend. From the testing that I've done and the results that I've seen from other people, she is the top option for the human speed female day. One of the reasons for this is because Fracture is one of the requirements for roar cancelling, and with the addition of the T4 skill, you can basically choose any character that has that in their striker skill, allowing you to basically stay on the same character and deal max damage from them. Even with that CTP of Greed, I was able to get close to 3 million, which I actually did hit after another try, and the highest I've gotten on that particular day was 3.2. Surprisingly enough, this is much better than some of the other options that I have that actually do have a proper PvE build, but unfortunately they don't have Rage, they have a single skill damage proc, and because there are so many mobs or kind of minions that spawn, it becomes really difficult to proc on the skill that you want with them lingering around. From what I've seen online, people with top-end PvE builds have been able to hit that 6 million mark to get the last reward, and even gone past that. Before I show you a little bit of her performance in PvP, I wanted to show you the stat sheet for her T4. She not only gets a pretty good bump for her physical damage, but more importantly gets a really big increase for her HP. Because of this high base health and the fact that she is iframing and dodging a lot of skills, a CTP of regen does become a viable option when you get her to T4. You'll notice from these clips that I only really tested her at level 80 to kind of give you an idea how the level difference factors in. The HP increase that you get at T4 does make a little bit of a difference, but it's not really that significant considering that she only really has heal on one skill. So for the most part, her survival is really dependent on her just being able to actually evade attacks. For timeline specifically, it might be better to go with a survival based build since you want to be able to fight more characters and live as long as you can to possibly get that T4 skill as well. Using a CTP of regen will help you with that since you can heal a little bit more from it, and using something like Mighty Steel CTP of Authority will allow you to combine that mitigation that you get from the uniform passive when you get hit with the one from that CTP, making survival even a little bit better. However, I find that the character can still be one-shot from hard counters like Hulk, and even from Adam Warlocks with a CTP of Energy that get a good damage proc activation. Because I don't really plan on using the character in timeline, considering how dominant Hulk currently is, I built her more for Alliance Conquest, and that is using a CTP of Greed. Meaning if I get hit by any of the three characters right off the bat, the penetration will activate and the CTP of Greed proc will be active as well, allowing you to basically one-shot all three characters. I would also recommend a CTP of Greed over Destruction because you won't really benefit much more from the Destruction considering that she does get penetration from her uniform passive often, and because you can benefit from the ambush effect that you get from the CTP of Greed, allowing you to take down characters like Hulk, which she has a type disadvantage against. Keep in mind that I only showed the character in timeline at level 80, not at T4, so she does get a bit better, but not game-changingly different. Also, I don't have her artifact, so her survival would be even better if I did have that. As you can see from the testing though, the character really isn't that great in PvE when she isn't T4. However, in PvP she does do quite decently, at least for taking out at least one other opponent. It's really when you get the character at T4 that you'll notice a lot of value for her in PvE modes, such as Alliance Battle Extreme, Alliance Battle Legend, and even World Boss Legend and Giant Boss Raid. With that said, if you're into PvP, then this uniform is pretty solid since it does give you another one-shot option for Alliance Conquest and is somewhat decent for PvP, especially more so if you can get her to level 80 and possibly T4. However, if you're looking at the character specifically for PvE, I wouldn't recommend her unless you can get her to T4. So there you have it, that's T4 Black Widow. She's a little bit of a mixed bag, and the value that you get from the character is really dependent on how you're going to use the character and how far you're going to take her. Hopefully this clarified some questions that people had. If you do have any more, you can consider joining the Discord channel or leaving a comment in this video. And again, if you did find it helpful or useful and you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing that, leaving a like, and possibly even sharing it with someone else, since it might help them as well. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch these, but the video is now over.